Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Lloyd. And morning, Hanalea. All right, looks like folks are trickling in here. You just need 2 more for a quorum.
Jonathan, Ebony asked to be excused.
Okay. Thanks, Ruby.
You're welcome.
Okay, awesome. There is Sally. Okay. Okay, cool. So we've got quorum. Let's go ahead and let's jump right in. Good morning and welcome to everybody. We've got a full agenda, a few things sort of added at the last moment, as you all could see from my emails yesterday. So we'll jump right in, not waste any time. First thing up are February's minutes. Everyone wants to just take a quick moment or two to look those over. And if there are no adjustments, or even if there are adjustments that need to be made, we can certainly have a motion on those.
Motion?
Okay, is that Danielle?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So we have a motion from Danielle to adopt the minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And that is from Sally. Any further discussion? All right, so if we'll just go ahead and put our vote in the chat. Motion to adopt the minutes. Okay. Right. Minutes are adopted. Okay. All right, next up, as you all may remember from last meeting, we've had a scoring panel that has been hard at work doing our spring COC scoring evaluation. And so we are ready as a panel to present that back to the larger subcommittee. And so I'm going to turn that over to Lloyd to present.
Good morning again, committee members. Let me try to share my screen. And I'll bring up the results if I can. Let me see. Always changes. Hopefully you can see the screen. Would you confirm that you could see my screen?
Yep.
You have a call from 96. You have a call from 9.
I believe that's me. Okay. That's not what I wanted. Okay. So again, the committee was composed of scoring committee composed of Jonathan Crooms, Shay Butler, Shay Kennard, Danielle Butler, and Alicia Thompson. And the committee had 9 COC funded permanent housing projects to evaluate, as we've done for a couple of years. This table that I'm showing you shows the scores of the projects from highest scoring project to lowest scoring in the 6 components. Areas.
Well, could you make the table bigger, or because it's right now all I can see is the last 3 projects and part of the scores.
Okay, so yeah, on my screen, it's already, I have to kind of scroll across to show the entire scores. I'm not sure what you're seeing.
Okay.
Yeah, your screen is at 200%, Lloyd. I think if you decrease that, we should be able to see more of it. In the bottom right corner, it says 200%.
Gotcha. Thank you. Is that better?
It's still the same for me from what I can see.
Well, now I've got it at 100% using that scroll bar. I'm not sure why I'm getting document recovery. Any better?
Lloyd, are you on a Word document or Excel document?
I'm in a Word document.
Okay. Yeah, that's what we're seeing. Maybe close out the document recovery slide on the left.
Not sure why that's even showing.
It might
Maybe
be
I'll-
frozen.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe stop sharing and then reshare.
All right, let's try this again. I don't know why. Thought I had this ready to go. Now I've lost the document I wanted to share. Jonathan, might you have that summary document available to share?
I do. Give me 1 second.
Open.
Okay, I've got it. It's just a matter of me sharing. Forgive me, y'all. How do you share again? Because I am just not seeing the little icon that tells me that I can do that.
You have to be co-host, or whoever is host has to allow you to share your screen, but it's
Oh.
generally at the bottom in the center.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, there it is.
everyone-
Okay. Oh my gosh, how did I not see that? Okay. Okay, is that working?
Yes. Works for
Okay.
me.
All right. And just tell me, Lloyd, whenever you want me to scroll down, move down.
All right. All right. So again, so we had 4 members on the committee, which we mentioned. Thanks for your patience with this technology challenges that we're all working with. The table here has columns from rows for each project, and then the columns, the name of the project, the organizational sponsor across the top, the 5 areas that we scored. The first 4, Colin Davis, my manager, and I reviewed each project's information. Most of the information came from the annual performance report, which was for the year, the calendar year 2021, how the project was performing in that year. Some questions related to, particularly around efficiency, related to how many people left the project in the case of a rapid rehousing project and left to permanent housing opportunities for permanent supportive housing. A lot of the efficiency also concerned people having left to permanent housing or continue to retain permanent housing within the project. And it also included looking at the total grant amount as reflected in the amount the project applied for in the 2021 competition, which is the current amount that the project is funded for. Housing First, component 5, Housing First orientation was a more subjective part of the evaluation, and this was the area that was scored by the 4 members of the committee. The members of the committee met with me twice last week to finalize the scoring. and also to review the scores that Colin and I had given on the first four areas. Component 6 was a self-assessment this year. The committee approved. Strongly encouraging projects to complete both the performance evaluation tool and the Housing First assessment tool that has been provided by HUD for a number of years, and submitting those to us with a cover letter by the executive director. All of the projects, with the exception of Home Again at the Housing Authority, did submit self-assessments. The penalty for not submitting self-assessments was a 25-point reduction on the overall score. The second last column on this table then presents the total score as a percentage. The total points available are slightly different from for permanent supportive housing projects as compared to rapid rehousing projects. And then the final column shows the performance evaluation tool self-evaluation that the projects themselves would have submitted to us. Not surprisingly, as you go down the list, the self-evaluation scores are slightly higher, sometimes within a percentage point or two, or even in the case of Dash, within 1/10 of a percentage point of the score of the committee, which suggests that the evaluations that we did, particularly in component 5 on the Housing First orientation, are pretty consistent with what the projects themselves scored their project. So one thing we want to do according to the evaluation policy, evaluation monitoring and ranking policy of the COC, we have the opportunity to recognize outstanding performance, which according to the policy requires a score of 90% or above overall, with no component area scoring less than a 70%. And I think there's the opportunity within that parameter to recognize both Rapid Rehousing 1 from Housing for New Hope, as well as the Dash project, which is right at the line of 90.1%, to recognize them for outstanding performance during this evaluation period. A couple other comments I would make would be that this year also, for the first time, we did deduct points for projects that did not completely expand the COC grant within the recently completed grant year. The two projects did lose some points in, I think it was in project efficiency. Dash lost 3 points for not spending about 3% of their grant in the previous grant year, and Rapid Rehousing 3 lost 12 points. So project efficiency was down to 28 points from a total of 40. So they had a challenge with spending all of their funds.
Lloyd,
Also,
that's a question about that one.
mhm.
So both the Rapid Rehousing Project and the PSH projects had a total of 40 for project efficiency.
Yes.
So Fresh Start lost a ton of points.
Yeah, the project of I was getting to that. Yeah, Fresh Start continues to have a challenge with the project efficiency insofar as since it's a rapid rehousing project, but the target population is chronically homeless people, and so it typically takes them a bit longer to help participants move towards housing stability, and particularly without the rental subsidy that the rapid rehousing project provides. So they did do better, I think, with exiting something like 28 people, but still they're when we combine the cost of rapid rehousing exits from the other two projects, rapid rehousing 1 and 3, and yeah, as well as the DCRC project, which we'll talk about shortly, and come up with an average for all of our rapid rehousing projects. The efficiency of rapid rehousing 1 and 3 in particular bring down the overall average and allow us to give full credit for project efficiency to those projects, but Fresh Start cannot meet that that standard. But overall, I certainly continue to be very supportive of Fresh Start, and their overall performance was at 99 of a total of 150 points. So they're at least in the ballpark with their overall performance.
So I got confused. So they didn't give back any funds. That score doesn't have anything to do with them giving back.
Correct.
Funds.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
gotcha.
Yep. So all right, their total on project efficiency is simply a reflection that they didn't get any points for the cost of exits to permanent housing, where all of the other projects would have gotten, I think, full credit, except for Andover had also, I think, had one minor efficiency deduction, 1 point. So we're not recommending, the committee talked about it, but we had set the standard for unsatisfactory performance at less than 65%, and all of the projects were above that 65% threshold on this evaluation. So the committee is not recommending any projects be placed on probation for the second half of this year. And then finally, if we could scroll down, Jonathan, to the final row, we'll talk about the Durham Crisis Response Center. Okay, so this screen or this table does not show the Durham Crisis Response Center. We did add Durham Crisis Response Center has a rapid rehousing project that was first funded in the 2018 COC competition. They also received renewal funding in the 2019 and the 2020 COC competitions that provide funding to operate the project into 2023 to continue to operate the project using COC funds. DCRC would need to apply for funds in the 2022 COC competition, which will be coming up later this year. The challenge that DCRC has been having is that they were not included in this evaluation, even though according to the evaluation monitoring and ranking policy of the COC, they should have submitted performance data. However, being a domestic provider providing services primarily to survivors of domestic violence, they are exempt from using the homeless management information system that all of our other projects use, but they are required to have a database comparable to an HMIS that would allow them to provide the data. However, even though this has been a requirement since 2018, and we made it clear to them that they needed a comparable database when they applied in 2018. In 2021 and 2022, DCRC still does not have a comparable database, clearly operational. They have gone through a number of leadership challenges, leadership changes. The people that originally applied in 2018 for the domestic violence bonus that originally awarded the funds, they left the organization when new leadership came on in early 2019. That executive leadership left the organization in early 2021. The board named an interim executive director, and the interim executive director left in early February of this year. We've not heard yet whether there's an interim executive director that has been named. And at this point, what we do know is that the organization does not have an operational database comparable to an HMIS and has not yet submitted the required annual performance report to HUD that was due to HUD by the end of October of last year for the initial grant period that ended July 31st of 2021. Colin Davis, our manager, has been trying to set up a meeting with the board chair as well as the staff that are implementing the rapid rehousing project that DCRC has been receiving COC funds for. We do not yet have a date for that meeting. I think at this point at the COC lead agency level, we'll be asking DCRC to voluntarily give up this grant and allow the COC to reallocate it in the 2022 competition. The grant amount is approximately $167,000, I believe, which the COC could reallocate to either a permanent supportive housing project or another rapid rehousing project. We hope to have a recommendation from the COC lead agency for this committee to consider and to make a recommendation then to the full HSAC for the HSAC's approval at the April meeting, but we are still trying to work out those details. So that's the situation with DCRC, and that would be the overview of the scoring of the permanent housing projects that have been completed in this first semi-annual evaluation. Jonathan, certainly feel free to make additional comments.
Yeah, thank you, Lloyd. I think you covered everything that I can think of. Wanted to open up the floor for questions, and my first question would be if there are maybe some areas that you and Colin identified in doing the physical scoring that our projects are doing really well in, and maybe if you could identify some areas where we're continuing to struggle, I'd love to hear your insights there. And then others are also welcome to chime in with their questions too, as well after Lloyd answers.
Yeah, thanks. I think projects are doing generally pretty well with like the component 2, if you could scroll up maybe to the top of the table, serving high needs population, generally are certainly working with Honolea in the coordinated entry processes. Our projects are doing pretty well with you know, getting people who have higher needs, and as we'll see in the system performance measures, are people coming into the homeless housing system have higher needs and longer experiences of homelessness than some years ago, and so they're doing pretty well there. Most of the projects I think are doing okay with particularly rapid rehousing, with moving people into permanent housing within a reasonable period of project entry. The HUD standard is that people move in within 30 days of project entry, and we are looking at that. I would say an area where projects are struggling would be particularly around helping people increase income, both increase earned income as well as increasing total income. I think in general, our projects, I think probably the case managers need to focus more attention on that, recognizing that certainly people in permanent supportive housing projects have disabilities that might make it difficult for them to be employable, but there are opportunities to help people get connected to vocational rehabilitation if that's their interest. We did offer some bonus points on the tool this year. We switched the bonus points from the HMIS implementation had some bonus points previously. We took away those bonus points, but added or included 10 bonus points in the performance component 1 area, and particularly 5 bonus points were available for projects that helped if projects did an outstanding job helping people exit to positive housing destinations, they could earn some bonus points there. One of the thoughts there is, particularly for permanent supportive housing projects, we want to encourage projects to help people move on a voluntary basis. And so there's some bonus points there when the projects are doing a good job with that. And then also bonus points were available for projects where a very low percentage of people lose some or all of their total income. And projects, I think generally across the board, got those bonus points for low percentages of people actually losing income. Those would be a couple areas that come to mind. Generally, I think projects are doing pretty well with helping people apply for and receive health insurance coverage, but there are some projects that could be doing better in that area. And HMIS participation is very strong. I think the scores under component 4 would suggest.
This is Tracy Lord. I think those are really good points. I think also with regards to permanent supportive housing projects, I think there's always going to be a challenge around not only battling housing barriers that's also compounded by limited income and skills. I think as we are trying to recover from this pandemic and we're coming out of 2 years, I think some of our members have really done well, but we've also are seeing the shift in the workforce where, you know, computer skills and computer literacy is really critical, from service levels jobs to higher paying, you know, wage jobs. And so one, we're really trying to find solutions to help people become more computer literate, more comfortable using things online, and also understanding that, you know, while their SSI or SSDI benefits are, you know, a good source of their income, and they're along with their recovery, you know, learning other skills is also important as they move on to become more independent. But I think that's going to continue to present a problem for a lot of the members that we serve who've been chronically homeless for years.
Thank you, Tracy. Those are good points. I was reading this morning a column from the columnist was suggesting that people coming out of the criminal justice system, second chance employment is a great need as well. And there are some organizations and businesses really working hard to give people with criminal backgrounds and histories a second chance at employment. And that's an area too that can be a challenge for many participants in our projects.
So Lloyd, you had indicated that Fresh Start had improved in their efficiency and in their performance. Do you have more information about like where you're seeing the improvement and where they're still struggling since they're the lowest performing project?
Now let me pull up their on their spreadsheet real quick. So on their overall performance, they scored well in the total income, which is a question that looks at improvements in total income. They got full credit there. They got again, they're strong with the second component, which is serving high needs population. They received 17 out of 20 total possible points there. Unit utilization is good, but again, their cost of permanent housing exits is high and makes it difficult for them to score well under project efficiency. I think they're scored pretty well also with, again, exits to permanent housing. They had 23 exits of participants to permanent housing, which is a good number for the total size of the project. Last year they had only, I think, 9. Last year they only had 9 exits to permanent housing destinations. So they did make some significant improvement there. A lot of that again depends on how quickly people can enter the project and then exit the project as well. They did get 2 bonus points for exiting people without housing subsidies. The percentage rate there was earned a couple of bonus points. So there was a couple areas.
But it sounds like the main challenge continues to be the length of time that people are in the program.
Yeah, I think just losing, they've consistently lost 25 points for the reasonable permanent housing exit because they're just not able to compete with the other 2 primary rapid rehousing projects in terms of project efficiency. One good point, we know those of you who have been involved with this evaluation for the last couple of years know that we've looked at whether the performance evaluation tool is doing a good job kind of comparing the apples and oranges of rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing equitably. And this year we have our three rapid rehousing projects that were scored. One is at the very top of the list, and one is at the bottom, and one's kind of in third place. So at least there seems to be some equity in terms of how the tool is scoring. It's we I think in 2020 our rapid rehousing projects were in the lower half of the 9 projects, and this year they're at least scattered from top to bottom, which is probably a suggestion that we've maybe hit a good balance.
The other thing that I think is interesting about that and will be interesting to watch is, you know, I had expected that to kind of flatten. Now that we have the new prioritization, you know, I expected most of the projects to be serving pretty much all chronically homeless clients. And the fact that that hasn't happened in the Housing for New Hope rapid rehousing projects is really interesting. And I think it's something to kind of keep an eye on, because I had sort of expected that difference between the projects to flatten as we, you know, replaced all their old clients with one prioritized in the system.
Yeah,
So
that is,
Paulette, did we
Oh, go ahead,
lose you
Sally.
there? I think you drew, I don't know. I'm not sure we heard the end of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying that I had expected, so in the past, you know, we had this conversation about Fresh Start is serving, you know, chronically homeless clients. The other rapid rehousing projects are not. So therefore we see this, you know, this gap. I had expected that to change now that we have the new prioritization where pretty much everyone is serving chronically homeless clients in rapid rehousing. So the fact that it hasn't with the Housing for New Hope rapid rehousing clients is interesting and something to, I think, keep an eye on. You know, is that just, they just, you know, haven't really rotated out clients yet? Is it something about the way they're allocating clients to the different projects? I don't know, but it's just something interesting to watch.
I think for that particular project, it's just more about how the clients were allocated between the different projects.
And that makes sense, Shante. Thanks for sharing.
So what other questions do we have at this point? Or comments or observations? So the next step would be for us, you know, maybe as a whole subcommittee here, maybe to adopt the scores. Obviously, the situation with the Durham Crisis Response Center is fluid and ongoing. If we, you know, if there are no other concerns with the scoring, as your chair, I would say a motion to adopt would be appropriate. And the other thing too is Lloyd mentioned early on in his presentation that we can, per policy, recognize projects publicly for outstanding performance by scoring above 90% overall and no less than 70% on any one component. And I believe in addition to Housing for New Hope Rapid Rehousing 1, I did the math, and I think Alliance also meets that with DASH, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that would be, you know, an appropriate part of the motion if the committee feels ready to adopt the scoring. Am I correct on the math on that, Lloyd? I think DASH meets that.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Would it be helpful for me to maybe state a motion? I can't call it myself.
Well, here, I'll try to state the motion.
Yeah.
All right, and you let me know if I got this right. Okay. I make a motion to accept the project scores presented here today and to recognize the Housing for New Hope Rapid Rehousing 1 and the DASH program for their excellence. Is that what we're recognizing them for?
And there's one other thing I forgot to mention, if you would add in, is that the scoring committee also has recommended no performance improvement plans for this. So actually, yeah, that would be a complete motion. So, all right, so I'll restate it. So Sally has very graciously made a motion for us to adopt the scoring, the scores presented here today by the scoring panel, with also to recognize for outstanding performance, Rapid Rehousing 1 of Housing for New Hope and Dash of Alliance Health. That is our motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right. And remind me, Shantae, which organization are you with?
Housing for New Hope.
Housing for New Hope. I don't think you can actually make a motion on this one since your organization.
That's right. You're right. Thank you.
Apologize for.
I'll second.
Okay, awesome. So Danielle is seconding. And any further discussion? Okay. For those, so please vote in the chat box. Yes, no, or abstain. So obviously we've got some folks in here whose organizations have been, projects evaluated. So you are welcome to vote, but you've got to vote abstain. Okay, all right, scores are adopted. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to the scoring panel. Thank you, of course, to Lloyd and Colin for the support throughout this process. And we'll be presenting this, I believe, at this month's HSAC meeting.
That's correct.
All right. Okay, so we're going to move right along here. We're going to move on to back to the benchmarks. And so I'm going to try to reshare. Okay, let me try this again. Okay, all right. Apparently you're only allowed to share one thing at a time, from what I can see. Okay, so last month, we as a committee adopted a set of benchmarks. And as I was preparing and talking with Lloyd to present those at the last meeting, a few other questions came up as we started to look at some of the current performance measures. It appears that some of the benchmarks just might be a little too low, and in my opinion, I think that would be might present a difficulty in terms of getting the HSAC to adopt the overall changes. So we are coming back to you with some suggestions. I'm going to briefly go through here the PowerPoint. I am going to be presenting a more finished version of this for HSAC. So starting off with street outreach, what I've got here is, of course, we know that there were no benchmarks for that type of project prior. We adopted the numbers in the green that you can see right there. Over in that far column, what we've got here is some data on the current system performance. And you can obviously see here where we're pretty low is on the exits to positive housing destinations. I think that's extraordinary that we're scoring in 67%, in terms of getting what I would understand to be the most, some of the most challenging folks who are homeless, living on the streets into housing. And I think that benchmark is just probably a little too low at 25%. And so in consultation with the community development department, we are suggesting a higher benchmark of 50%. So we're suggesting no further changes here with emergency shelter for families. Again, you can see in the red here is what the current benchmarks were. The ones that we adopted as a committee are in the green, and you can see, what our performance is here. And as we talked about last time, the challenge for length of stay for families, getting them to housing, that's a challenge continuing to be for trying to get those folks housed as quickly as we can. So, those benchmarks are, I think pretty well in line. No further suggestions here on emergency shelter for singles. So again, you can see the current benchmarks and then the ones we've adopted there in green. Transitional housing. So we do have some more suggestions as well. So transitional housing, and we've only got one project here in our COC. You see the old ones, the ones we've adopted. Total income, we are scoring right now as a system, as that project around 59%. And that is quite a bit higher than what was adopted. And so, again, a recommendation coming back here to bump that up to 65%. Mainstream benefits, things like food stamps, the old benchmark 75%, we voted to keep it the same. What we're actually scoring here is around 17%, and that is quite a bit lower than 75. So the recommendation there would be to come back with a much lower standard of 25%. Certainly these two benefits here, total income and mainstream benefits, they kind of have a bit of an inverse relationship. If we're doing really well on the income, then the mainstream benefits, I think we would expect to perform less on, which is a good thing, a good thing. Okay, rapid rehousing. Again, you can see the proposed that we adopted, where we're performing on the length of time between entering a project and housing move-in. 80 days is quite a bit higher than what we've adopted. And so we're coming back, with a bit higher, a little more reasonable benchmark proposal of 45 days or less. And then with permanent supportive housing, we are not making any other recommendations at this point. So those were the four things that wanted to come back to you all with for consideration for change. Floor is open for questions. I also want to make sure, Sally, I don't know if you saw my email. You had sent us an email. I want to make sure we have time for your question too. So why don't we start with your concern, Sally?
Oh, I think I had been in the HSAC policy and planning meeting, and Hanalea can chime in here, in which I thought I heard Hanalea say that that there were some more positive exits from non-congregate shelter than congregate shelter, perhaps due to the length of stay in the shelter. And I don't know, you can probably restate that in a accurate way, Hanalea.
Yeah, that's correct. The rate of exits to permanent housing for non-congregate shelter has been much higher than the rate of exits from congregate shelter. And I do believe that's primarily because clients in non-congregate shelter are able to stay in place longer because it's a lower barrier option for them, and that means fewer disconnections in services and able to maintain connections until we're actually able to get them housed.
And so I do sort of feel like that there's a little bit of a, I get the, the brief, limited time homeless, but I do sort of feel like, when you're encountering somebody with, a lot, trying to, rapidly move them into housing without, fully getting to know them and their needs and, sort of work through all these other things is really difficult. So I sort of feel like that the longer stays in shelter, and being more thoughtful about a housing plan, ultimately leads to more success. And so I feel like there is a bit, the having everything measured by, how quick you do something is not necessarily guarantee success. So I don't really know that I have a specific, thought on the measures themselves, on the benchmarks, but I just feel like it's something that we should think about.
And I agree with you on that too. I think what you're kind of alluding to is sort of the bigger picture. I mean, if we get somebody permanently housed in 4 or 5 months, who we think is going to have a better chance of staying, but it just took longer. I mean, that's still success as to maybe, rushing through. I think the challenge here is that length of stay, or there is a HUD standard on that, right? I mean, HUD wants us to get people rehoused within 30 days, which, that takes an extraordinary effort, to do. So I think that kind of remains something that we continually shoot for, even if, but it should never substitute for quality of services. And especially, I think what you're talking about too is support services, the good plan, things like, SOAR. I mean, it takes time, especially when you're trying to get somebody SSDI. So, as I think about that, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I know it's one measure, it's one measure. What other comments or concerns do we have about the benchmarks?
I'm wondering about the rapid rehousing, length of time between entry and housing move-in.
Mm-hmm.
If right now the current system performance is 80 days,
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't we try to raise that benchmark to 60 days or less rather than 45?
So, Lloyd, I think I'm going to let you answer that, if you will.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think the staff was recommending 45 out of recognition that HUD's goal is 30 days or less. And we have had some projects that have been meeting the 30-day goal on an average. Certainly is recognition that the whatever the average is would mean that there are some households that take longer than that. But I mean, if the committee wanted to put in place a 60-day target, that's certainly within the committee's purview, and we would be happy to accept that as well.
I think I'll just add, I think from what you had told staff, Lloyd, it sounded like up until really recently we were meeting this 30-day standard. So that's where we thought, it might not be necessary to really increase it up by another 30 days since for so long we had been meeting the standard. Is that accurate to say?
Certainly on some of the rapid rehousing contracts that I've been managing, we have been meeting the 30-day average, coming in at like 29 or 30 days exactly, but we do know that during the pandemic, there have been significant challenges with identifying housing units for people to move into in the Durham market.
It does seem like, yeah, as, I mean, you know, I'm sure Urban Ministries and Housing for New Hope would, you know, be able to speak to this, but, you know, it does seem like with the turnover of apartment complexes and new management, all of that that's gone on over the past 2 years, and less interest in accepting rapid rehousing and wanting, and even those that, you know, some are now only accepting housing choice vouchers. I just don't know that that's going to change anytime soon. So, you know, it may be, you know, there may be some impact of COVID just on the amount of time it takes to do things, but I think the larger thing is the selling of apartment buildings and new management coming in that I think warrants an increase to 60 days until we see some shift in the housing market.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that even more so than just COVID, I think there's a lot of landlords that are not accepting vouchers. They don't want to accept the vouchers anymore. The rent prices are skyrocketing. And so trying to meet fair market rent and rent reasonableness has been a challenge for our housing location team. And we're all getting to the point where, you know, we're at least at Housing for New Hope, where we're about to start aiding housing location, because it's just everybody's competing for the same units at this point. And that's making it more and more difficult to house people in that 30-day window. And as we continue to get more people who have gotten evictions, especially during this COVID time, I think it's just going to present even that much greater of a challenge.
That's certainly worthwhile comments. One complexity with this, with particularly the emergency solutions grant regulations, are that case management services cannot be provided prior to housing move-in for longer than 30 days, so that projects leadership and case managers will need to be mindful that anything longer than that prior to housing move-in will need to be characterized as housing search and location services and not case management services. But that's getting into the weeds just a bit.
Right, and that's what I think we're all trying to, well, at least what we're considering, because it's been, for some clients, I know one of our projects, our average length of time between entry and housing move-in was 55 days at the end of last year.
Do we have a sense with, you know, so this is an average number, right? Do we have a sense what's pulling that number so low? Is it a particular project? Is it, you know, maybe a particular set of circumstances?
That's a good question, Jonathan. I've not looked at the individual projects to run the annual performance report that came up with the 80 days. I simply took our rapid rehousing group for the system performance measure reporting, which would include all of the COC rapid rehousing projects, the 3 that we've looked at performance already this morning, as well as emergency solutions grant funded projects, whether they're funded by the city or by the state emergency solutions grant resources. So it was a pretty good group, I think, of about 10 different projects within the HMIS that were included in that overall annual performance report that came up with the 80 days.
So, thinking about the feedback I'm hearing and, also keeping in mind that, we have to continually be in line with HUD and the state. Is there a way for us to come up with a number that allows us to stay, be strong in our applications for funding, yet also recognize the unique situation that is happening in this area with housing? Or let me rephrase and simplify it. I mean, does even the suggestion of 45 days, does that complicate things for ESG?
I don't believe whatever standard the continuum of care adopts complicates our applications for funding. What would complicate things is what projects are actually reporting to HUD on their annual performance reports, as well as emergency the emergency solutions grant caper as well, that reports project performance. So it's a question of, we hold out a target for projects to aim for and pay attention to, but it's their actual performance that really gets evaluated at the project level.
Does HUD evaluate it against its own standards versus the HSAC standards?
Well, we on the system performance measures, which we'll be reviewing with the HSAC at its March meeting as well, there is particularly the length of time homeless is evaluated, and HUD does evaluate our system as a whole in terms of the length of time people are homeless in emergency shelter, as well as the overall length of time that people are experiencing homelessness, which has seen a significant increase over the last several years.
Okay. So really the standard is kind of irrelevant in terms of funding. I mean, it's really, HUD just still at the end of the day wants us as close to 30 days as possible. But this is more of us kind of as our own community looking at this and saying, what's a reasonable time frame for a well-performing project, given this community, the unique circumstances here.
Right, I think that's a good way to frame it, Jonathan.
So what does the group want to do?
I guess, is that the only of the proposed changes? Is that the only one that people have concerns about?
I do want to bring up one more. This is just my own thinking about this. I'm going to take us down to permanent supportive housing here. If we look at mainstream benefits, we are underperforming at 45%. The health insurance, I don't think that's unreasonable to keep it at 75%, even though we're underperforming. I think that a lot of the people that end up in permanent supportive housing, end up with Medicare or something, something like that. So I think that's a good thing to shoot for. I do wonder if maybe the mainstream benefits might be too high on the permanent supportive housing, but you know, that's just my concern. That's, you know,
This is Tracy. I think we just have to keep in mind, we don't control the market, or own or operate some properties that we want to gain entrance into, and that many of the people that we serve have housing barriers, which makes it even more difficult to not only have them housing ready, but also help them sustain their housing once they get it, and also prepare them to move on and exit to other housing opportunities. So it's just, it's not as simple. It seems kind of simple, but it's not really as simple as, simply saying, yeah, we should be hitting it at this mark, because there's so many other X variables that really do impact how the work is done on a day-to-day basis, and then also the outcomes that we get from year to year.
yeah.
I guess for those permanent supportive housing for mainstream benefits and health insurance, I don't feel like I can comment without understanding more about who the permanent supportive housing clients are. And is that measured at exit into permanent supportive housing? Is that when that is measured? Or is it, at what time point are you looking at the mainstream benefits and health insurance?
And I think Lloyd, I think that will be a question for you there.
Yeah, that would be measured either at annual assessment for people who are continuing to be in the project at their kind of anniversary of project entrance, and at project exit. Now, I've done a quick review of the 6 projects that we evaluated performance on recently, and all of them were in the 67%, two-thirds really, or higher. I think one project was up over 80%. So, but the sample here includes HUD-VASH participants, and obviously our COC is not providing supportive services to all those participants. So the sample is larger than just our COC funded projects. And that apparently, I didn't run an APR specifically for HUD-VASH, but apparently would be bringing down the overall percentage, overall performance. I mean, if the committee would like to revise the target to, 2/3, or again, this is your proposal more than the staff. The staff is recommending the general targets, but it's the committee's work that will be considered by the Homeless Services Advisory Committee in its final efforts to approve targets.
I'm just asking a clarifying question. This is Tracy. So under health insurance, the screen that we're seeing right now, current is none, proposed is 75%.
Correct.
Okay. And so when we're referring to health insurance, it's like connecting them to Medicaid. Most of the individuals I'm thinking that we serve would probably be eligible for Medicaid because they have a disability or some other, condition that wouldn't necessarily qualify them for Medicare or some other insurance. So, okay.
I mean, I would just think that anybody who's, is not on disability benefits would have a difficult time with health insurance due to the Medicaid gap. And then anybody who's on SSDI is going to have that 2-year gap. as well, getting health insurance. So, but I don't know. I don't really know the, the population well enough, but I hear Jonathan's point about the mainstream benefits. And I'd say that for me, I also think there would be concerns around health insurance, but it seems like that those would be, gets at some proposed benchmarks and then better understand why people aren't qualifying for those.
So I am going to try to keep it, make sure we have enough time for Hanalea too. So let me just sort of kind of bring us back to, options for moving forward. So, the figures in green, we've already adopted those. In terms of moving forward, we have a couple options. One is we could leave things as they are, and I can present them, to the HSAC as they are. Two, we could adopt some or all of the suggested changes. Three is we could, further postpone work on this, if more, research is needed. Those are sort of the options I kind of see at this point. I think this is difficult because we want to, maintain, high standards, and yet at the same time recognize, and make reasonable benchmarks for, for our people in the midst of some very challenging housing and financial circumstances. So, those are sort of our three options at this point, and certainly happy to entertain a motion, whatever that would be, at this point.
I think for the rapid rehousing, length of time between entry and housing move-in date, I'm thinking consider 60 days, because not only are we, we're up against the barriers that clients, individuals have, but we're all competing for the same units across the community. So if that means we need to take more time, then to discuss it further. That's what I'm thinking.
Are you making a motion to that effect?
Yes.
I will second the motion to increase the length of time to 60 days.
Okay. Does the motion, or will the motion include anything about the other suggestions in purple that have been made? Or is that the only thing that you all want changed?
Well, I will add that I think you brought up something around the mainstream benefits and insurance. So I don't know if we want to try changing that to 60% to both.
Where I'm kind of going with is I think it's easier if we make a motion for
Right.
all the things that we want. So, and
Right. So I guess, yeah, so it would be a motion to approve all of the changes in purple, except 60 days for rapid rehousing, 60% for mainstream benefits, and health insurance for permanent supportive housing.
Okay, so. All right, I'm gonna try to make this sort of in line here with Robert's Rules of Order. Shante, would that be your motion as well, since you initiated this?
Yes.
Okay, so so Shante has made a motion that we adopt all of the changes in purple, with one amendment that we increase the length of stay to 60 and include a change of reduction on mainstream benefits to 60%. I think I covered that. Does that sound accurate?
And I think health insurance to 60%.
Okay, and health insurance.
I mean, given that there was none, and it seems like those are tracking sort of similarly.
Okay, all right.
I mean, Shante, it's your motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I motion to increase the length of time for rapid rehousing to 60 days, mainstream benefits to 60% for permanent supportive housing, and health insurance to 60%.
Okay. All right. And Sally, I'm assuming you're seconding that.
Yes, I second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion? All right. Let's take a vote in the box. Okay, all right. Okay, it passes. All right. Thank you to everybody. Keep in mind, we can always revisit this too. It is, I have found this to be very challenging. So I appreciate everybody's questions. I appreciate the support from staff. And I will plan to present these to HSAC and, at this month's meeting. Hanalea, I'm so sorry. We're only leaving you with about 11 minutes to present. I hope that's enough. If not, we will be glad to have you back at the next meeting too, of course. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you.
Great, yeah, no worries. Glad to have the time. First, I need to just apologize to the committee for last month. Did not know at the time, but I had been exposed to COVID and essentially had passed out, so I was not here. So I apologize for missing the meeting and appreciate y'all letting me back. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, so we're talking about the performance for the second quarter of this year. Got to make this bigger. All right, there we go. All right, so first metric, and I will say the full report, I believe, was sent out to y'all last month. So anyone hopefully had a chance to read it. Anyone who has questions, let me know. But this is just some highlights of some key metrics. So the first metric I want to highlight is diversions as a percentage of the overall intake, overall number of intakes conducted in the front door of our coordinated entry system when people are initially seeking services. So as you can hopefully see here, our diversions continue to perform very well. We're continuing to see improvements in our performance. And after a small drop in the first quarter of the year, we've seen rebounding. We're continuing to outperform national standards. We are, for singles, amazingly, we're upwards in the high 20% at this point. For families, we are around 45%, so nearly half of families are being diverted, and that puts us overall at around 30%. So really amazing performance here, and we're really happy to see this. All right. The next metric I want to highlight is the percent of shelter clients that enter shelter and have disabilities. The reason that we look at this metric is as a kind of as a proxy for the vulnerability of the clients entering shelter. And if you remember, one of the goals of our coordinated entry redesign a number of years back was to create more access for vulnerable clients and to divert those who were less vulnerable. So as you can see here, we just continue outperforming ourselves quarter over quarter with this. The singles numbers have sort of leveled off. So I anticipate this is probably where we're going to land, which it's, I think anything we should be really happy with because we're, between 70 and 80%, which is phenomenal compared to where we started, which was below 60%. For families, the metric has continued going up. So families were a bit slower to start improving, but they're still kind of catching up to themselves. So this past quarter, we were kind of in the 45% range, really happy with that, and hopefully we'll continue to see improvements. All right, then the second metric that this is kind of the other side of the coin, looking at the vulnerability of clients entering shelter, is the percent that were unsheltered before entering shelter. So again, if we're doing our jobs, most of the clients entering shelter should be unsheltered, and those who were housed should be diverted. So kind of reached a steady state here in the end of the last year, and we've been able to maintain that rate again after seeing a small dip in the last quarter that probably corresponded to the small dip we saw in diversions. We've rebounded here. So happy to see that we're maintaining for families, maintaining about 20% unsheltered, and for singles upwards of 60%. So I'm really happy with these numbers compared to where we started, which was closer to 15 and 35% respectively. All right, percent of clients served that exit to permanent housing. So we were just talking about some metrics, and I do want to highlight that I measure this a little differently than HUD does or than we usually talk about. I think this is a really, really important metric, and probably, in my opinion, an oversight that HUD isn't looking at this. This is not the percent of exits that are to permanent housing. This is the percent of clients served overall. So everyone that touches our services, how many of those clients exit to permanent housing? And so this is kind of a blended metric that allows you to look at stays overall and exits at the same time. Here, it's an interesting pattern. We were seeing some improvements at the beginning of the year, and basically we've sustained those improvements, but not improved any further, or we haven't further rebounded to where we were before after we saw a significant drop in 2020. The question is, will we continue to maintain this? Will we rebound further? I think the next quarter will be really interesting to see. But basically where we are overall is in the kind of 10% range, for singles, a bit lower, closer to 9%, and for families a bit higher, closer to like 11%. But we would like to see this continuing to improve. So we'll have to see what the next quarter looks like. All right, this looks at the number, just checking the time, doing all right. This looks at the number of permanent housing placements that we've made per quarter. So this is just literally how many people have we enrolled in rapid housing and how many people have we enrolled in permanent supportive housing. And if you remember, we saw a precipitous drop kind of early 2020 as we shifted to the new system, and we've been rebounding ever since. In the first quarter, and that's specifically for rapid rehousing, I should say. So in the first quarter of the year, we had kind of finally reached the 2019-2020 levels again after like years of drop, and then like that major drop at the end of 2020. So really happy to say we're sustaining that. So that wasn't just a fluke. It seems to be, where we're at. So that's really good news that we've sustained. The flip side of that is we're not performing any better with all this COVID money than we were previously, but, it kind of depends how you look at it. If you think about all the things we were just talking about the challenges with the market, the vulnerability of the clients we're serving, this may be all we could hope for with the dollars. But glad to see we're sustaining those improvements. For PSH, we did see an increase in permanent supportive housing placements in the second quarter. I think we were around 6 or 7. This is really due to the hard work that the permanent supportive housing providers have been doing to move clients on that are ready. I think really speaks to, if you can see, we've had 3 quarters of like 1-2 placements a quarter. In this past quarter, we had 7. So that's phenomenal. Hopefully this is not just a fluke. Hopefully we will continue to see openings as clients move on. And I do believe we have that on the horizon. We have a number of clients working to move on and working to use their vouchers. And we will continue to see an increase in availability of PSH as a result of the hard work of the providers to move on. Question about how long that'll be sustained, how long those will be available to us, but really good work happening, and we're seeing it pay off here. I think that is the last metric I have for you. Yes. So any questions, comments, anything? I've got a couple minutes.
I just have 2 clarifying questions. When the measure percent exit to permanent housing, is that the measure from HMIS when it's, I mean, do you separate out anybody, like anybody who goes to an institution, you know, which isn't considered a positive exit, or is that just the overall population exit to permanent housing?
This is just overall out of those served, overall in COC, which you imagine is a very large number, how many people are exiting.
Okay, out of the whole homeless system. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the unsheltered before entry, I sort of thought you had to be unsheltered before entry into shelter, but that's not, but that's including all the housing programs.
Nope, this is just shelter. So clients at imminent risk are eligible for shelter.
Okay.
I think generally your program doesn't serve them, Sally, so that might be what
So
you're
I don't-
thinking of because of the population you work with. But in particular, as you can see here, the family shelter tends to serve a lot of imminent risk clients
Okay.
because there just are fewer unsheltered
Okay,
families.
thank you.
And ideally, I think we'd like to see probably near 100% of the singles being unsheltered before entry. That's our goal. We're pretty far off from that, but much closer than we were. But yes, imminent risk clients are eligible for shelter. They're just lower priority.
Thanks.
Finally, do you know if whether or not any of the in the households that have exited to independent living, if they've utilized any of the vouchers that's circulating through our community, whether they're emergency housing, mainstream, or the housing choice vouchers through PHA?
Yes, definitely. So we have had a number of clients exiting with HCVs, with housing choice vouchers. The EHVs hadn't hit in this quarter that you're looking at because we did our first allocation of EHVs in December. So this quarter ends at the end of December. So I think maybe we had housed one client by early January. So it'll be the next quarter that we'll really start to see the EHV impact hitting. But yes, there's some housing choice voucher clients in both the first and the second quarter who were housed.
Okay, thank you.
All right, committee, we are right at time. Is there any last questions, or if there are, we can certainly ask Hanalea back for the next meeting?
Well, at the next meeting, we'll have finished the next quarter. So I may be back sooner than later with the next quarter. So we may not have to wait long before you have some answers to what things look like.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, given that we're at time and it is important to me to start and end meetings on time, if somebody would kindly make a motion to adjourn followed by a second, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. All right. And Sally has made the motion to adjourn for the day. Can we get a second?
I'll second that,
Okay.
Jonathan.
All right. Thanks, Janine. All right, everybody. Thank you for a great meeting, and we'll see you at the HSAC meeting in about 2 weeks out. Have a great Thursday.
Thanks, everybody.
All
Bye,
right.
everybody.
Bye.
Oh, hey, Jonathan, quick question. I
Sure.
noticed on minutes that I was not listed as being a committee member. Am I a committee member or not a committee member? Or I'm not on HSAC, but I am on this committee, so I'm listed as other present.
So you are a committee member, and I just can't remember off the top of my head. I think you're a liaison, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so that makes
So
you
if-
a committee member.
Okay, so I don't know if you want to look at the
I think
minutes and see if
she's-
that's done right.
I think Sally was in the, I don't have her listed as a actual committee member.
It's a CSC liaison.
Yeah, she's a liaison.
Okay. But
Are you saying,
okay,
are you
I
saying it's
see,
not
yeah.
correct? Are you saying it's not correct on the minutes?
Well, I don't know. I was just asking a question because, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I was just clarifying if on the minutes I was listed correctly.
Yeah, I put you in the liaison, but if I need to, but that's what I thought you were, but if I need to move to,
So this is my understanding. So I mean, yes, there are HSAC members. Those of us like myself who have, and Dr. Birch, who have an HSAC seat. There are COC liaisons, but for purposes of this committee, a COC liaison is a member of it because you have, full voting privileges. So I guess I'll have to look a little more closely at the minutes, because you are a voting member. You are a member. All the liaisons for this committee, are essentially voting members, but you're not an HSAC member like us.
Yeah, so
holding-
no, as long as y'all list me however I'm supposed to be listed, that would,
Okay.
thanks.
All right, you bet. Thank you.